Today, we're going to try to answer all your questions about film and television writing.
This will be an informal Q&A session as we try to answer most, if not all, of your questions about writing for film and television. By the way of introduction, my name is Suzanne Herrera-McCullough.
And my name is Bob McCullough. I've been a working member of the Writers Guild of America for over 30 years. And between us, Suzanne and I have more than 300 credits for writing, directing, producing, and even acting.
As an actress, I quickly realized that writers have the most impact on an audience, and I began to shift my focus on story ideas, characters, and writing scripts.
We actually met at Universal Studios while I was working as a television series kind of a junior writer.
Eventually, we started selling scripts, and then we worked on multiple shows, sold a handful of pilots, and some screenplays were optioned. And over time, friends and family members started bringing us their script to read and critique. And what we discovered was that we loved giving advice and teaching people about the business and how what's the best way to write a good script.
Then about 8 years ago, our nephew, who was an aspiring writer, he asked us what we thought about screenplay contests. We'd never really heard of them, so we did a little research.
And what we quickly learned was that most screenplay contests are being run by people who have never had a job in the industry and who have never even written a script, much less sold one.
So the question we asked ourselves was actually pretty obvious. Why would anybody take advice from someone who has never actually done the job?
That's what inspired us to start the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards and the Wiki Screenplay Contest, the chance to help writers improve their craft.
And that's what today is all about, helping you make some real progress as a writer and learning how to turn your work into an amazing career.
The purpose of the session is to answer any questions you have, and no question is too silly or basic.
And we'll try to keep the answers
Right.
short and to the point so that we can cover as much ground as possible. Our first question is from Nathan, and he wants to know, is there any point in writing spec scripts for existing shows, or is that not a thing anymore? Well, I think that writing a spec script for an existing show is a great idea because those shows always need more material. And sometimes there's a lot of staff turnover on a particular show. Even a hit show, they'll go through writers and producers fairly frequently. So if you deliver a spec script that they like, that certainly shows the tone and you capture the characters of their series, you might get a phone call.
And what eventually might happen is they may just like the way you write and may give you another idea for the show, and then you're off writing that script.
Exactly.
So a question from Philip: should a writer focus more on writing for a specific genre that they're particularly good at, or should the writer develop scripts in various genres to show their talents in writing a wider range of material? Well, I'll start. I think you should write what genre you like, what you're good at, and just customize that script for that genre.
Yeah, don't write a show just because you think you should write that. It's got to be a show you like, and it's got to be a genre that you're really into. Otherwise, it'll just feel very static. And but I think you're right. Find the genre that appeals to you and go for that, and pretty well stick with that for a while.
And then after you sell a lot of scripts and you're a big deal, then you can write whatever genre you want. That's how it goes, right?
Right. So Alexa has a kind of an interesting question here. How do you use phrases like inspired by and based on real events to promote your screenplay? Well, I personally don't think that helps promote a screenplay at all. It's really about the writing and about the story. Everything's inspired by something, right? And most certainly personal stories are generally based on our own lives and what we've gone through. So I don't think it carries a whole lot of weight. I'd much more be interested in how good the writing is and how compelling the characters are. And again, people put a lot of stuff on the covers of their script pages, and the only thing that really matters is the title and your name, frankly. Because what really counts is what's between the pages.
Unless it's based on your true story, then you have a real
Right.
personal interest in it, and you might share that.
Mhm.
We have a question from Derek. I have a pilot for a TV series that has been a finalist or a semifinalist in several contests, including yours. Thank you. Congratulations. You must be a very good writer. While I've been entering these contests, I've continued to write 4 other episodes that do flesh out some of the issues the judges raised. Knowing that my pilot is being well received, how do I get an agent or a production company to read the other episodes? I feel that if they see the roadmap that I have laid out so far, this series will have a better chance to sell.
Well, I have a very strong opinion about that. First of all, nobody's going to read more than one script. So make the one script really good. Make it, the script is so good that you want people to find out what happens next. Let them ask you what happens next. But to write 4 episodes and then present it to somebody to read, they're not going to read 4 scripts. They're going to read one script to determine whether or not you're a good fit for their needs. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, this is from James. He has 3 questions, so we'll just take one at a time.
Okay.
Great that you have so many questions. We're thrilled to help. What should be in a screenplay opening scene? What should you try to accomplish in the first few pages? Well, there's a secret that used to be a secret. That's not a secret anymore. The first 10 pages is probably the most important pages of your writing career, because unless you don't have that hook that the reader is interested in and they continue reading, it's very important that you do have an exciting opening scene.
Well, I think
the first 10 pages, right?
And specifically to his question, he wants to what should be in the opening scene. Well, my personal opinion is you should introduce us to the protagonist right away, and it never hurts to know what the protagonist's problem is right away. That really draws us into the story and the conflicts promptly. So he also says, talk about point of view in the entire script and in the scene. Should the POV change from your protagonist to another character? I don't think so. I think once you have a POV established, who's telling the story, through whose eyes are we actually experiencing the story? To be shifting points of view is very, very tricky. If you're Christopher Nolan, you can pull that off. Martin Scorsese does that very effectively in one of our favorite movies, Goodfellas. But shifting point of view is a very tricky thing to do. And I wouldn't suggest it unless you're already an established screenwriter.
His next question is, talk about pacing. If a reader finds the pacing of your script is off, what can you do to correct it? For example, if the pacing is in the second act is flat, what can correct this?
Go for it.
Well, you probably need to reread the first, 20 pages of your script. You might have to switch things around. Pacing is really important. It has to be a real page turner, because without that, you have to remember, every producer, every screenplay contest, they all have readers, and depending on their qualifications, they either will like the first 10 pages or they will not. And if the pacing is slow, they will not pass that script on to the producer that they work for.
Here's a quick tip to make a reader really like your script. Don't put too many words in the first several pages. Lots of white space. White space is your friend. If a script reads quickly, the reader will feel pacing and they'll be immediately involved. They'll want to read more. They'll be turning pages quickly. If you write large blocks of text in your screen directions, in the initial pages particularly, if it looks like your history textbook, it's going to really slow the reading down. A script should read at 60 seconds per page, which also translates to 60 seconds of screen time. So if it takes you more than a minute to read a page, just lose half the words. And I promise you, nothing will change except the reader will be able to read it much more quickly. Your story will remain the same, but get rid of superfluous verbiage. It's nice to have a big vocabulary, but you don't need to show it off in a screenplay.
So Marcus, is a question from Marcus. If a writer isn't aiming to get their work to land with the big studios or into theaters, but for streaming services or straight to TV movies, do services like The Blacklist, Coverfly, or competitions help with that? or are they better options?
Well, that's a good question. Uh, First of all, the streaming services and cable outlets, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, those are becoming much more mainstream, particularly for new writers. And I don't know if, frankly, the Blacklist, Coverfly, they really help at all. What you will get from them is perhaps a little bit of publicity, but they're not going to send your script to these network streamers or cable companies. That's really up to you, a manager if you have one, and certainly at that point, you don't even need places like the Blacklist or Coverfly to kind of host your material, as it were.
This brings up the subject of credibility, who you give your script to. We just want to convey that there's a lot of screenplay contests out there. That's one of the ways to get your script out there and to be read and to make it better. But not all screenplay contests are equal. A lot of screenplay contests promise things that they really can't deliver, such as managers and agents. What we do is we don't really promise anything except make your script a really good script, make it better.
We bring it up to the professional level as quickly as possible.
So I just encourage everyone out there. There are other screenplay contests besides ours that are good, but you need to do your research and make sure people who are reading your script or judging your script have been in the business,
right,
and they know what they're talking about. So
right.
We have a question from Richard. My question is whether exceeding 120 pages is never considered a good idea with spec scripts, even in cases where adding 3 to 5 pages would help in terms of developing characters more or fleshing out some of the subplots.
So Richard wants to know, should he add instead of subtract? This is one of my favorite topics. Most scripts are far too long. Remember,
you're guilty of that, right?
In my first drafts, I always overwrite like crazy. I'll write a 150-page screenplay, but when I'm done, I have a 90-page screenplay. You can imagine how much I'm cutting out. The fact of the matter is, your script has it becomes a guidepost for producers. They want to know, how much is this movie going to cost us to produce? Well, a 150-page script is going to cost a lot more to shoot than a 110-page script. The other thing to keep in mind is, particularly for both television and theatrical distribution, they want turnover. They don't want somebody sitting in a theater for 3 hours watching a movie. They're only going to sell you one bag of popcorn. They want a 90-minute movie in theatrical releases. Very rare is a movie that goes over 2 hours. So my suggestion, Richard, instead of adding 3 or 5 pages, cut 3 or 5 pages, and you'll be a lot better off.
And we know as writers that's really hard to do.
Right.
Cut out.
Kill your babies, right?
Yeah, but it's only because you want to improve the script, and a script too long is one strike against you.
Right.
Rebecca has a question. I've written 3 screenplays with the same central characters. There are full-length crime mysteries set in New York during the early 50s. They have subtext touching on issues that resonate with us today. Is there an appetite for this kind of material? And if so, how would one market it?
Well, I think there is definitely a market, particularly for a well-written script, regardless of the period it's in. But having written 3 screenplays based on the same characters, that's a little tricky. I would suggest that you take the best elements of all 3 scripts and put them in the first script. And I think, certainly when you mention subtext touching on current issues, that's very important, particularly in today's marketplace, where we want to deal with certain social issues. Certainly you'll get better casting if your movie is actually about something that really means something to people. So I just recommend that you look at all 3 of your scripts and see if you can't consolidate the main points and the main character arcs into the first script and work on that one. Okay, Daryl wants to know. Good question, Daryl. What's the difference between a manager and an agent? Which one is more important?
Oh boy, you want to take that first?
Sure. A manager is somebody who, first of all, most managers want to become producers. They don't.
That's true.
They don't quite have the clout. They don't have the connections yet, but they wanted to find talent that they can hook themselves up with. In other words, they want to be the caboose to your locomotive, right? So, in in generating that relationship, they'll want to work on your material with you. It's almost like you get yourself a writing partner. And a manager, of course, will have many clients. So they'll be working with you and other writers at the same time. And managers will then help get your material out there in the marketplace. An agent is really just a deal maker. If you have a pending deal, if you have interest from the studio, that's when an agent will step in and negotiate that deal. You'd be surprised. A lot of agents don't even read the scripts that their clients come up with. So, manager first, agent second. My personal opinion is when you're starting out, a manager is much more important than an agent.
And something to keep in mind, we've had many managers and agents. At the beginning, you really are the one that is hustling to get the work. You're the one trying to make the phone calls.
An agent gets 10% of everything forever, and a manager will get 15% or sometimes even more. So be very careful about getting too many people to help you.
Because your paycheck could be going away.
Right. The cliche I say often is, if you're looking for a helping hand, look at the end of your arm, because it's your career, you're in charge. All these other people who are going to be taking commissions from you, they're there to help. But remember, you're not their only client. So that's why I've had 9 agents, I think, and 3 managers.
Here's a question from Douglas. Should I try to write for movies or for TV?
Well, there isn't a big difference these days, is there? Although, if you're on a series, it's a whole different, they're 2 different worlds.
They're still 2 different worlds.
Right.
Totally.
If you're writing feature film scripts, keep this in mind. The average movie takes between 5 and 10 years to go from development, hey, I have a great idea, to being on the screen. So that's a long time period. If you're working in television, you could be writing a script that shoots every 3 weeks. So it's a completely different pace. If you don't live in LA, I think it's very difficult to break into television and sustain a career.
And you have to realize, when you're writing your movie, your baby, there's no one on you about getting the script done at a certain time. So you have to be highly motivated to write your movie. You have to sit down every day and write. So there's nobody encouraging you to go on. So you have to be very motivated. And for television, though, if you're lucky enough to be on a series, you have to report every day and you have to write every day. And there are a lot of people spurring you along.
Right. Television is deadline driven, and writing for spec features, it's entirely up to you, as Suzanne said. So Matthew has a good question here. I hear different things about how long a pitch should be. Any advice about that?
I'd say under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes usually works really, really well. Here's the thing about pitching. If you tell people too much in your pitch, you're going to get a lot of questions and things will begin to unravel. I think the shows that we've sold, we literally sold one pilot that became a big deal at ABC and Disney. We sold that in under 30 seconds.
I think a lot of people want to know what that pitch would sound like. So why don't you do the one-line pitch for Tag Team?
Oh, okay.
This is just the line that sold the show.
Okay. 2 wrestlers become cops. That was the entire pitch.
That was it.
That was the pitch.
And they really loved that. It was very unique and different at that time.
They immediately saw, the WWF was a big deal at the time. They immediately saw it. Everybody's seen a buddy cop show, and that's all this was, with 2 guys who used to be wrestlers. So
I know that seems pretty simple. Some are a little bit longer.
So if you can create a log line, that's really your pitch. And a log line should never be more than 5 sentences, frankly.
So Samantha says, when asked to rewrite my script by a producer, should I make all those changes, even if I don't agree with them? Well, it depends.
Suzanne's nicer than I am. Go ahead.
It depends on if this is your first script or this is your 5th script. If this is your first script, you have to be very careful because you don't want to alienate the producer. So, but the bottom line is, it is your script. And if you think that his suggestions are not right for your script, you should just make some changes, but maybe not all the changes. If this is your 4th or 5th script, you have a lot more power, and you negotiate with the producer.
Shall I tell my William Goldman story?
Okay.
All right. So William Goldman, I'm sure everybody's heard of him. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was well known, and in his book, um, which I recommend everybody get a hold of, Adventures in the Screen Trade, he tells this story. He would always get script notes, and he would always walk into a producer's meeting and they would say, "We love your script, but we have some ideas." And he would pull out a yellow legal tablet and a pen, and he would write down verbatim everything they said. And he would nod and say, "That's interesting. That's interesting." And when the meeting was over, he would walk outside, tear the sheet of paper off the yellow legal pad, crumple it up, and throw it in the nearest wastebasket. And then he would go home and fix the script the way he wanted to, because it was his script, his career, not theirs. You have to remember something. Producers, studio executives, they come and they go.
But he also was a very, very famous writer.
Yeah, no, he
So
was well
so
established for
he
sure.
could pretty much do what he
But the
wanted.
fact is, most people giving you notes will forget the notes they gave you until they see the next draft. And by then, it's a whole new script.
So Carrie has a question. I was an English major and thought writing a script would be easier for me, but it's not. Should I take a screenwriting classes? Absolutely. Even if you can write a script, if you're fairly new to the business, it's important that you take screenwriting content, screenwriting courses, see as many films as possible, read a lot of books about the topic, and just read a lot of real scripts. You can actually get scripts online, and you can read all the, for an example, I would read all the Academy Award winning scripts
Sure.
to see what was so good about the script.
Carrie, I think it's very funny. You say that you thought you could write very well, but script writing is different. Screenwriting is different. Well, I'm here to tell you that writing a screenplay is very different from writing a novel or any kind of prose. It's very technical. It's very structured. Your formatting is very important, which brings up a topic I want to present. The number one thing that gets scripts knocked out of contests generally is poor formatting, because your formatting is really what shows the reader that you're a professional, that you know what's expected, that you understand that why the industry has a certain format and you know how to pull it off. And that's why I recently wrote a book called Stop Screwing Around and Format Your Screenplay Like a Pro. It's available on Amazon.com. And I just recommend that everybody take a look at this, because it'll save a lot of trouble. Because if you're not formatting properly, it doesn't matter how good your script is, your story, your characters. It's really a technical thing. And I think it's one of the most, writing a script is much more difficult than writing a short story. It's just a completely different thing.
And it's a really little book, so it's really easy to read. I know
it's this big and that thin.
I know when we started, when I started writing, I was reading books that were pretty thick and they were pretty boring. This gets right to the point.
Right. So Timothy has a question. He says, an independent producer wants to option my script and hopes to get it financed. What should I ask for when that happens?
A contract.
Ask for a contract. And in that contract, ask for everything you can think of, because it'll be a negotiation. You'll ask for the moon and he'll give you Mount Everest, that sort of a thing.
We have to be practical.
Sure, but a free option I don't think is a good deal, because that means he's not really invested in it. I wouldn't option anything, even if you've never sold anything. I wouldn't option anything to anybody for under $1,000 for an 18-month period. Simply to get them, you want to see the commitment from them to your work. So be very careful. Hollywood's full of people running around handing out free options to people, meaning they control your material. You suddenly lose control of it, and you've got nothing except their promise. And I'd just be very careful about it.
And it doesn't have to be an 18-month time period.
Right.
It can be, and if they want it for 5 years, walk away. That's really too long.
Right.
And you need to ask for updates in the contract. I mean, we've had screenplays optioned, and we don't know what's going on for months at a time, and you need some updates. Josie says, what are the most important things I should know to sell my script? Well, I think there is no good way to sell your script, to be honest with you. Anything goes, but in my opinion, the most important thing is the more people you know in the business, the closer you're going to get to selling your script.
Exactly.
Film festivals, go to plays. You meet a lot of people in the industry when you go to those kinds of things. You know, in each town, there are film festivals and they go on for days at a time. And it's important that you go and mingle. And what's really interesting is, do you remember the business cards that used to be such a big deal?
Right.
Well, they still are in the business, because when you meet somebody, instead of saying, let me give you my email address, you just hand them a card. And in that card, you can still put your name, number, and what you do, because you're a
Sure.
writer.
Sure. And the other thing to have on that card is your website URL. It's very important. Suzanne's really referencing the whole networking process and marketing yourself.
Even though it sounds old fashioned, because of the internet has taken over, there's some people skills involved.
Sure, sure. And I think you can present yourself very effectively online by having a nice little simple website that describes yourself, your writing, and perhaps gives some examples of your writing on the page.
So Kelly says, oh, the number one question, or the number two question, where do I find an agent and or manager, and how much do they cost? Well, we touched upon that.
Yeah, we kind of covered that, but a manager will get 15% or even more, and an agent will get 10%.
Right. You can start by Googling agents on the internet, and a lot of agents will come up. And I think the Writers Guild.
Right. The Writers Guild of America, you can find them at writersguild.org. They'll have a list of signatory agents. That means people who've signed the Writers Guild agreement as agencies. And without that, you're dealing with somebody who either isn't qualified, isn't bonded, doesn't have any real resources for you. So I'd be very careful about signing with a willy-nilly guy, your cousin's friend who lives down the street, unless he's signed as an agent with the Writers Guild of America. Be a little careful about that.
But make no mistake, when you get your first agent, I can remember to this day, it was the most exciting thing I had ever done in my life. I thought. You. We have some more questions.
Well, let's see. Let's look at, here in the Q&A, Joan wants to know, is there script writing help for reality shows? Well, certainly, Joan, it's a very specific field. Reality shows are generally talent driven. In other words, the Kardashians are probably the prime example. They have their own persona and things like that, and their own following. They have a huge social media following, which drives the whole show, as do most of the other reality shows.
But make no mistake, the reality show is not just about reality.
They're all scripted.
They're all scripted. So, and the talented people in that reality show make it look like it's not all written. And that's why people like the families like the Kardashians are so successful, because I think they add their own personality to it, and it seems very real.
Right, right. And I think in Joan's question, is there writing help for reality shows? Well, the producers of a reality show really run the scripts. So they would guide any staff writer in terms of what's going to happen next. So let's see. Victor has a question. He says, I couldn't find the 10-page contest on your website. I understand they run every 30 days. That would be the Wiki Screenplay Contest, Victor.
The world's fastest screenplay contest.
Right. And just go to wikiscreenplaycontest.com. And that's a 10-page contest. The first 10 pages are really what count. And that contest does run every 30 days with cash prizes and all kinds of great things. And it's a very high tempo kind of a thing. You'll get written feedback very, very quickly. You won't have to wait 3 months to find out what the judges think of your script.
And we really try very hard helping you make those 10 pages as good as possible, because as we said before, those 10 pages could be the most important 10 pages of your writing career. Let's see. A question from Jen. I have a couple scripts that have won multiple awards. Congratulations. Now that I know I can write, what should be the next step towards getting something sold?
Well, it's all about who you know at this point. If you have won multiple awards, you must be a very good writer. I would reach out to the list of managers and agents you can find at the Writers Guild of America and you can find them on various websites as well. And I would let them know about it. Again, I would promote yourself. It's all about, you're really in the business of gin. You're not in the business of your script. You want to sell people on you as a writer.
A lot of writers these days are creating their own websites.
The other reality, Jen, is that it's very rare for an unknown writer to sell a spec script and see it get produced. What's going to happen is producer's going to like you, going to like your writing style, and they're going to have their own idea, and they're going to put you into development on one of their ideas. In other words, you'll become a writer for hire, and they'll pay you to write the script. And that's really the objective, I think, when you're starting out. Don't be looking to sell that first script. Be looking to get the first gig, right?
Right. I can't say how many jobs we've gotten off of our spec
Oh, yeah,
scripts.
yeah.
And we have a few spec scripts that we laugh about, that those spec scripts have made us more money than any scripts that have been shot, because they've gotten us jobs.
And they've never been shot themselves.
Right.
Right.
Okay. We have a question from Irina.
Mhm.
What is your best advice on writing a biography screenplay?
Well, it's all
And
about.
she says, thank you.
You're welcome. It's all about the character, Irina. If the subject of your biography is interesting, and if they've had challenges they've had to overcome, which obviously they have, or you wouldn't even know their life story, that's what you want to emphasize. A biography about somebody who is boring is frankly going to be boring. So my best advice is focus on the character, look at the primary objective that they determined for themselves early on in their career, whatever it was, and focus on that, and be darn sure that you have conflict in every single scene. We just saw a couple of movies last night, and they were really, really well done, because every scene moved things forward. Every line of dialogue moved the scene forward. So I just recommend that you focus on a character who has a real objective and has a great deal of difficulty achieving it. If life is too easy, not very interesting, is it?
I just remember, again, the first 10 pages, you need to hook them. So they have to be a real page turner.
Right. So Leslie has a question, interesting. As a Canadian WGC member, is it possible to obtain a manager in the USA? Well, absolutely. I mean, we know a number of Canadian writers who do very well. I worked with a lot of Canadian writers in the television area, frankly,
and a lot of Canadian actors we work with.
And I've been a member of the WGC myself. So you're asking if there's synchronicity between the Writers Guild of Canada and the Writers Guild of America. There's a relationship, but that's about as far as it goes. They have completely different contracts, and different working rules, different agency rules, things like that. The Writers Guild of America is quite a bit more expensive to join, but I can only recommend it as extremely worthwhile. So Jay has a question.
Okay.
For Suzanne, I think. How do I get my foot in the door with a producer and get my script to them? Go for it.
Just for me.
Sure.
Well, Jay, again, I think we've touched upon this. There is no specific way to get to a producer. We have had friends who were sitting next to a producer in a play, and he did not know it. And they started talking, and this producer was seeing his daughter act in this play, and a relationship blossomed from there. There is no way. There is the traditional way, of course, sending emails to hundreds of agents and managers if you want, with your resume. Again, you do a web page, go to festivals, go to plays. There's just so many different ways to get a manager and agent, and you'd be surprised if you surround yourself with people in the business or wanting to be in the business. It will happen for you, but you have to have a great script, because once they ask to see if there's anything you've written and you hand them that script, if it's not good, you're not going to hear from them.
Right. But again, you're in the business of selling yourself as much as your material. They want to know what you're like to work with. So emphasize that. So a couple more questions before we wrap it up.
Okay.
Brad wants to know, My script is 140 pages. Is that too long for a contest? Well, at the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards and at the Wiki, we have a 130 page limit. That's because any script over 130 pages, we believe, is going to be on its face overwritten. It's just too long. It's not going to get produced. So
Unless you're Martin Scorsese.
exactly. My recommendation is if your script is 140 pages, try to cut 20 pages out of it. And you can do that very, very easily if you look at every scene and say to yourself, I need to start this scene in the middle of the scene. And I need to find the point of the scene and make that point as soon as possible and then get out of the scene. You'll find yourself losing pages like crazy.
So Peter says, is it better to enter a big contest like the Nickel or to look for a newer, smaller contest? Well, I'll take that first. Everyone has heard about the Nickel contest. If you're a really experienced writer and have won multiple contests, you're probably ready for the Nickel contest. But if you're fairly new to the writing business, a smaller contest is really a great way to start to build up your experience with contests and to get the feedback. Also be careful about, again, we talked about what they promise.
Yeah.
Don't pick a contest because they promise you money necessarily, although money is good, or representation, because usually that does not happen in a lot of the contests.
Yeah, be careful also. The bigger, more established contests, they get thousands and thousands of submissions.
That's true. The competition is
the smaller contests. It's much easier to win a small contest like the Wiki, for example, because first of all, it runs every 30 days and we generally see less than 500 submissions. The Nickel sees 5,000 submissions and it takes a year to find out if you've won.
If you look at our website on Wiki or Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards, we have many, many writers' testimonies as to the jobs that they've gotten, and managers and agents because they perfected their script. And I have to say, sometimes people, as in producers and studios, do reach out to us to see some scripts, and then we would ask your permission to send them, but it's not something that we promise. But people are aware about our contest, and they know that we try very hard to make everyone's scripts better.
Right. So Marvin wants to know, should I enter more than one contest at a time? Well, there's nothing wrong with that if you can afford it. They aren't cheap, but I would suggest maybe 2 or 3 contests at the most, and then find out how your script is doing and make adjustments so that you can kind of move up the food chain.
Right.
We've had scripts come to us that didn't do very well at all. We gave them notes and feedback. The script came back sometime, a few months later, and it suddenly became a finalist. We gave notes on that script. The next contest, they won. That shows you the progress that people can make when they're getting, credible professional feedback.
Now, I have to say, we have great respect for people who have entered scripts that are far, far away from real selling material, that did not get discouraged, that took the notes to heart and kept coming back, whether it's to our screenplay contest or somebody else's, and they kept on trying, and they finally managed to get a great script.
Which is a great segue to my original book, Stop Screwing Around and Win Your Next Screenplay Contest. There is a technique to winning a screenplay contest. There are strategies, and I kind of lay those strategies out in this little book. Again, it's a very small book, very short, to the point.
Very little.
And people who read this book generally come back and their scripts do much, much better in the contest. Then before we close today, I do want to mention my other book, Stop Screwing Around and Write a Screenplay That Sells. There's a difference between writing a script that wins and a script that sells. So I just recommend go to Amazon, take a look at these 3 books. Can I hold all 3 up at one time?
You're shameless.
I'm shameless. But any one of these 3 books will put you far ahead of most other writers who are submitting to contests and trying to get things produced. So I just recommend check them all out. They're on Amazon.
And the reason Bob came up with these books is because these were the top 3 or 4 questions that were always asked, and they're not huge books. they're very helpful, and it'll help you write that
I
manuscript.
really wrote the book so people would stop asking me about the other books they'd read, because the other books that are, there are hundreds of books out there. I won't mention any titles. I've read them all. I've written a 300-page book myself. It's incredibly boring. It dances around the point forever. There's a very famous book about screenwriting, and after you've read 600 pages, you realize, oh, I actually need to have a story. And that's the whole point of the book. So I just tried to cut through all that clutter, if you will, and just get to the point. So
somebody asked, where did you come up with the title, the continuing
Stop Screwing Around?
Yeah.
Well, because people, be very careful that, procrastination is your big enemy. And reading books that take a month to get through, that's the worst thing you can possibly do, because what does it keep you from doing? It keeps you from writing. My books can be read in a day, and you can be writing that night using those principles. So I just recommend it.
So before we close, I just want to encourage everyone and anyone who is a writer and wants to get in the film and TV industry. The most important thing is not to give up, and to keep trying, and to write is to rewrite, and never
Exactly.
ever give up, and you will eventually get that great script, which will lead you to get an agent, a producer, or a manager. But the number one thing I would tell anybody is do not get discouraged and not to give up.
And you can always send us further questions to info@SantaBarbaraScreenplayAwards.com, and either Suzanne and I will get back to you. We're happy to help. We're really not about anything other than helping you make some progress in your screenwriting or television writing career.
So until then, I guess we'll see you at the movies.